Nittany Lions in overtime win it. There he goes. He is gone. 30, 20, 15, 10, 5. Touchdown, Penn State. Intercepted. Intercepted by the Nittany Lions. Touchdown, Penn State.
This is a football game here today in Iowa City at Penn Stadium as Penn State 3-3. Looking for its Big Ten win of the year, visiting the Iowa Buckeyes. In the Big Ten, plenty to come on that game. We'll dive into the stories right now impacting Penn State football as we welcome you into Penn State football Pregame show brought to you by Modelo. Brian Tripp, former Nittany Lions, Christian Hackenberg, and Jason Kabinda along as well. Obviously, we will get into it. It is a pregame show. We will get into the matchup between the Nittany Lions and Hawkeyes, but we'll start today's show as we take a look at what is coming up today with the biggest topics and the biggest stories right now impacting Penn State. And obviously, James Franklin, the head coach, relieved of his duties after 11-plus seasons at Penn State and 104 wins. And then today, no Drew Allard, injured in that game against Northwestern late last week. So a new era of Penn State football, and they embark on that today against Iowa. We'll talk plenty about the Hawkeyes coming up later on in today's program. But head coach James Franklin relieved of his duties last Sunday. 6 days later, they get ready to play a football game today. He was informed by athletic director Pat Kraft, according to Franklin, on College Game Day this morning at 1:30 last Sunday, and then at 1:45 addressed the team briefly in an emotional statement to the team before leaving the Lasch football building. So, Jason, Christian, we were not expecting 3 weeks ago for this season to trend this direction, and obviously we have to start today with the biggest news, and James Franklin no longer the head football coach at Penn State. Terry Smith, the interim head coach, as everyone's known by now. We've had 6 days to digest the news, really wrap our heads around how this program fell off so quickly that Pat Kraft, the AD, felt like he needed to make a change. Christian, for you, what has this week been like as you've tried to wrap your head around what's gone on here so quickly with this Penn State football program?
Yeah, obviously a swift reminder about what today's day and age is. You know, things can happen quickly. Word spreads fast. Reactions, media, and pressure all matter. So there's a lot that I think went into the decision. I want to start off by thanking Coach Franklin again. I've done it several times, but really just the perfect example of consistency at a program. Did a lot of things for the program, so that's awesome. But I think I'm really more curious, and a lot of folks have touched on this about the locker room, man. Like, how are these guys feeling? I think Coach Smith has a little bit of a psychology battle going on there about getting these guys ready to play. But this is the business of college sports now, man. The world keeps spinning, and there's a lot that goes into this for players and coaches alike. So really excited about tonight's game and kicking it off here and seeing how these guys react, because at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what I think, because I'm not the guy that has to strap them up. But
Jason, you were obviously part of a Big Ten championship won by James Franklin, and he rebuilt a program after Bill O'Brien guided it through a very dark time. James Franklin, with heavy sanctions, rebuilt the program, not just on the field, but I think facilities, like everything around it, modernized Penn State football and got it to the precipice of a national championship last year. Your reflection on him and his tenure as a head coach, being a part of some impactful games that he won at Penn State, but then ultimately the decision to move on and turn the page to the next chapter.
Yeah, I mean, you talked a lot about it. It's very tough, to wrap your head around all of this fully. Obviously, all of this has happened really fast, from going last year to being a 2-minute drive away from going to the national championship game, to one play away from beating the number 2 team and, possibly being the number 1 team in the country, to now, 3 weeks later, Coach Franklin being fired. I'd like to first acknowledge, just how much, Coach Franklin has done for this university. He took this job at a time that absolutely nobody wanted it. Myself, Christian, guys like us came to Penn State at a time that, plenty of people were in our ears telling us not to. And, we kept Penn State afloat. We kept that standard. Coach Franklin kept that culture and that standard. So I think the number one thing here is to appreciate all that he's done for our university, while at the same time, number two, being able to flip the page over and this is a big opportunity for Coach Terry Smith. I was able to have a candid conversation with him over this week, and he said the locker room is devastated, as they should be. I think we all are. It's a reminder that although those kids are kids, everything that they do, the way that they play, the way they go about their business has real life consequences for everyone around them. So I really hope that this is a wake up call for that locker room, for this program. And, some of the best stories end up being the best stories because at one point you thought it was over. And we hope that this is one of those stories where from now on, these guys are able to go on and take care of business and be the Penn State football that we all know that they're capable of being.
Being on the sideline over the course of the last few games, I know, Jason, you had the opportunity to be out at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena when Penn State took on UCLA. My 2 cents on this decision, I think only time will tell if it's the right decision or the wrong decision in hindsight. But it felt like to me, and I have tremendous respect and appreciation and love really for Coach Franklin, everything he's done for the program, for myself, for the entire university. But it felt like it was the only decision at this time, Christian, because there started to be a sense of apathy. And that's not on the field, but in the stands, from the community, from boosters, with a $700 million plus stadium renovation underway in this new era of college football. You need that support, and apathy is the one thing that you cannot have. And it felt like it was over, right? Like it was time to turn that next page. And that's a really, really tough thing for a guy who had a lot of built up credibility, did a lot of great things for a program. And again, only time will tell, but it felt like apathy is the one thing you cannot have at this stage.
Without a doubt. And I think the one thing that we have to remember is that this is a results driven business. And you can talk about the build of Coach Franklin and what he's done and all of those things, and they can be acknowledged, but it can also be true exactly what you said, where, to be frank, there was a plateau, right? I mean, we won our Big Ten championship in 2016. We were able to get back to it last year, but came up short. So there was a plateau in performance, and he gets a lot of credit for building those expectations. But at the end of the day, when you build those expectations, there's still a belief that comes along with that from everybody involved in the program that you're still going to be making steps towards that. And the last 2 weeks was definitely not a step in the right direction, on top of all of the other narratives that built up really since the 2016 campaign. Granted, there were some big wins in there, as Coach Saban mentioned today on College Game Day, but dive into those a little bit. There's some arguments to be made. So when you look at it big picture, to your point, there was no other option. There was too much pressure. It reached a boiling point, and the pot just couldn't keep the overspill in.
Jason, you were away last week. Christian and I tried to really dive into the Oregon game, the UCLA game, and look at what happened in those games. Now you throw the Northwestern one onto it as well. We talked about how quickly, really in a span of 15 days to like 3 weeks, how quickly this thing changed. I don't know that anyone's been able to pinpoint a reason. Do you have any hypothesis as to how so quickly things changed for this program? Why?
It's hard to quite put my finger on what that how is, but what I do know, I was sideline reporting during that UCLA game, and while I was on the sidelines and I was, looking at the faces, even as they're walking out of halftime down 27-7, I could not see a sense of belief in self. And when you lose that sense of belief, when it doesn't feel like the confidence is there, now you're fighting a mental battle that affects absolutely everything that's going to happen out on that field. And I think that was the biggest thing, the biggest change to me, because we were so close to get Oregon. But when we lost that UCLA game, when we lost that Northwestern game, we lost it in a way that Penn State never, ever loses games. And it felt like lack of effort. It felt like a lack of want to. It felt like a lack of will, to be honest. And I think when you have those types of concerns, when those types of things come up on tape, that's when you have the bigger concern of whether it's coaching, whether it's culture, what exactly is going on with this football team. So I really hope that with, Coach Terry Smith stepping up, that he's able to reestablish and reinvigorate these guys with that sense of belief, with that confidence to go out there and play the way that we're capable of playing, and to let them know, let everyone know out there who we really are as a program.
Yeah, we'll talk about what interim head coach Terry Smith has said to the team, what he said to the media, and what they've done to prepare for Iowa today. But the next step of this discourse is, okay, it's happened. So everyone wants to know what's next. Let's hear from Penn State Athletic Director Pat Kraft on what Penn State is looking for as this coaching search begins.
The search. We're going to continue to conduct a national search. Our next coach will be someone who embodies everything Penn State stands for: integrity, accountability, toughness, humility, and an elite motivator. We'll find a coach who can achieve excellence at the highest level, doing it with confidence and conviction. Recruiting will always be a pillar here. We want someone who will attract elite talent, retain players in the NIL era, and make Penn State a destination. This is also about the modern era of college football. Our next coach needs to be able to maximize elite level resources, attack the transfer portal, and develop at the highest level. This person has to fit Penn State. They need to represent the toughness, the blue-collar work ethic, and the class that defines this institution. We want someone who honors our tradition but isn't afraid to evolve, someone who understands the weight of we are and leads us forward with a vision of championships. The right coach will rebuild the unity and pride that defines this historic program. And they will ignite this fan base around a shared belief that we're capable of greatness and we're going to do it the right way. And we are the best program in the country.
A pretty clear vision and a pretty clear outline from Pat Kraft as to what Penn State is looking for in its next head coach, and also a pretty clear statement that Penn State wants to win a national championship, and the next leader of the program, with the help of a supportive administration, is going to be the guy that will get Penn State to a national championship. Christian, just your reaction to everything that Pat said there, and then as this conversation has started this week, the direction that they're heading with this coaching search.
Yeah, I think a lot of the adjectives are something that everybody wants across the country, right? When you just talk about broad stroke, and I didn't take too much from those things. They fired me up, they got me excited, but they weren't like groundbreaking by any stretch of the imagination. But the one thing that I think is groundbreaking in that is the next coach has to fit Penn State. And we're speaking to a bunch of folks here, probably on this pregame show, who understand that, but not everybody and not every talking head in America does. And that's something that I think us three sitting here hold near and dear to our hearts. And it's just different. It's hard to put it into words, but that to me is called getting it right. You know, I think Coach Franklin was slightly polarizing throughout his entire tenure here, and what that did is it created a great divide. There were people that loved him, there were people that hated him, and there was really no in between. You're looking for a guy who can bridge the gap there, and the one thing that I think all Penn Staters rally around is what it means to be a Penn Stater. So that tidbit to me is going to be the ultimate pendulum swinger in this search, is who fits that the best.
Yeah, and
Jason?
really echoing what Christian said there, and kind of just diving a little deeper when he says, like, what does it mean to be a Penn Stater? You know, in my time in the NFL, like, coaches knew what being a Penn State guy meant. They knew what it meant that they recruited or drafted a Penn State guy. It meant a guy who was never going to be late to meetings. It was a guy that they didn't have to worry about partying on Saturday nights before a game. It's a guy that's going to go about his business the right way. It's a guy who's going to work hard. It's a guy who, sacrifices the me over the we. Like it's going to be we and the team all day long. So when it comes to culture and who this next guy is, those things have to be number one. Those things have to be apparent. And I'm not sure if everyone understands just how monumental of a decision this is, because it truly could change the trajectory of the program if it's not the right guy, if it's not the right fit. So I'm really glad that Pat spoke on that, and that he made that the utmost importance, that fit, and a guy who knows what it means to be a Penn Stater and what that's all about. That's super, super important.
I'm going to say, and I know people watching are hoping that we're just going to give names. And I think every name out there is a possibility with what Penn State is going to throw into this job. And it's not only the head coach, it's a combination of head coach and general manager in this new era of NIL and college football. But to me, the most important, you guys can take this whatever direction you want, is also the timeline here. Because if you don't get a coach in place, and this could be impactful, look, getting the right candidate is by far and away the most important thing. But because of an early December National Signing Day and a portal window that starts in early January and runs through mid-January, if you're looking at current head and assistant coaches at the collegiate and NFL level who are going to be coaching through December and through January, that makes it a little bit more difficult to make this a quick turn. Everyone wants what Kurt Cignetti has done at Indiana. But if you're going to push that timeline back because you're trying to find the right candidate, the time frame here is also really, really important as they make this decision, Christian.
That's a great point, Trip. And I've been a guy talking about the value of those assets and being able to bring them. And that just, to your point, shaves it narrows the target even more so, right? And great point.
Yeah,
Jason,
it's gonna
what
be
are you
tough...
looking for in the next coach?
Yeah, like I said, fit is number one. I also think, being a super recruiter is going to be a big thing. Although, like, I know Coach Franklin was a great recruiter. I know we've been a top 20, national recruiting classes year in and year out, but I don't see why we can't be top 10, top 5. What those attributes or traits end up being that make that jump to being able to have consistent top 5, top 10 classes. I can't exactly say, but I do know that we're gonna need star power. We're gonna need a big swing. I do feel that way in order to justify everything, because I do feel like, personally, that Coach Franklin deserved the respect to be able to finish out this season. And the fact that that didn't end up being the case, I think when this hire comes out, everyone has to be able to look at that name and feel really, really good about it at the end of the day.
Christian, we're going to put a bow on this. I want to get your thought on one more thing. I'm just looking off in the distance, and the Penn State team has arrived here at Kinnick Stadium for tonight's game. We are actually going to talk about Penn State and Iowa at some point during the show, but this is the big topic, and this is impactful on how they're going to play tonight's game. But I mentioned the head coach GM thing there because of modern college football. How do you view that dynamic playing out, and what's the value of having a GM in this go-around?
Yeah, I think it's vitally important when you look at building, it's something that hasn't existed. And when you look at building a roster, a lot of guys who are really good football guys oftentimes have a hard time being that grade A recruiter that Coach Frank, that Jason was talking about. It just takes a really dynamic guy. When you can offload the dynamic recruiting side and then also dealing with the contract negotiations and all of these other things that ultimately fill up your day with nothing that has to do with football. And going back to my earlier comment, this is a results-oriented business. Your head football coach should be focused on that, getting the team ready and putting the best product on the field. That's going to be vitally important. And frankly, I think Andy Frank did a good job, and I think Coach Franklin really trusted him. But I think there could have been more resources put into that prior to this. And that's one of those things that I think ultimately was a factor playing into this decision-making, is how good of a grasp do we really have on all of those factors? Looking ahead, who's going to be that guy? Where's that working relationship going to come into play? Another great point, Trip. I mean, you need that in today's day and age. You need that. That's going to evolve. Bandwidth's going to be vitally, vitally important.
You mentioned looking ahead. There is a game to play tonight. And in the interim, it's a guy, Terry Smith, who was a part of James Franklin's staff for 12 years here and bleeds blue and white. With the season where it is now, Terry was asked, how would you measure success the rest of the year?
Success is the team pulling the rope the same direction. It's when you watch us play, you guys will come in here and your questions won't be effort. Your questions won't be they look lethargic. If we lose, it's going to be because that team beat us and they were just better. We won't answer questions about how we lost the last 3 games. There's not one of those teams that we could arguably say was better than us, including Oregon. So I promise we're going to put a better product on the field that every Penn Stater is going to be super proud of.
There's no question that Terry Smith has nailed every press conference this week. He's nailed the messaging around the team. But this, Jason, is a really, really difficult dynamic to manage right now with a very emotional, fragile, and really it's a raw emotion right now with how quick this happened for this Penn State football team.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, we got to remember, like, these are kids. You know, Coach Franklin went into these kids' houses, you know, personally recruited them and trusted their parents that, you know, he'd have their backs and, you know, develop them as young men and as young football players and, you know, hopefully give them a chance to be able to move on to the NFL. So to not have that guy there and for it to be a result of the way a lot of those kids were out there playing, it's very, very tough to swallow. You know, everyone is devastated. I spoke to Coach Smith. He said it's a devastating time. You know, it's a very emotional right now. And, you know, he told me he's doing his best to keep these guys locked in and to get that fire back is what he told me. And I think getting that fire back means, man, going out there and having fun again. Going out there and not feeling all the pressure, going out there like we're still 10 years old, going and knocking on our neighbors' houses to get the kids out to go play in the backyard, man. We got to get back to going out there, celebrating together, you know, making big plays and having fun with each other. You can't ever lose the fun in this game. And it started to feel that way when I was watching these guys. It started to feel like the fun wasn't there. And man, that's just so important.
It's not only the fun, Christian, it's getting tough. It's physical. It's having that swag back. There's no question this is a talented and good Penn State football team, but they need to get that physicality back on the offensive and defensive lines. That's going to be a big point of emphasis as Terry tries to get this thing on track.
Yeah, big point of emphasis, and we'll touch on it later. No better test than tonight with Iowa, which is, you know, definitely a string of their DNA as a program. And frankly, you know, Jason brought up a bunch of really good points about having fun and all of that. And I think Coach Smith's biggest challenge is going to be, I think he needs to pull out who's going to be the guys in this locker room moving forward through all this turmoil and change who are going to embody what it means to be a Penn State football player. And to me, that is tough, disciplined, hardworking, selfless, maximum effort at all times, right? So you're going to find this, I think, throughout this process if you're looking for silver linings. And then secondarily, he's also going to have to find other motivating factors. And in today's day and age, he has a couple at his disposal with transfer portal, right? Not only are the players now auditioning for 100 and however many other programs are out there, so are these coordinators, so are a lot of these position coaches, and that's where the business side of it comes into it. So I think that's a real easy way to tangibly, like, yeah, this is an emotional time and there's emotions attached to this, but again, you have to look at this now more from a business standpoint. And, you know, Jay and I can speak from experience in the NFL, like working in that environment, every opportunity to put your best product on tape is your lifeblood. That is your career. That is your trajectory. This isn't something that should be taken for granted. And, you know, there's money on the line now too. So can these guys come out here and find a way to motivate each and every guy? And it's not going to be the same. There's going to be some things that are really good for Penn State. There's going to be some things that are really good for the individual players. And I think Coach Smith understands all that. He's always been about business and Penn State. So that's going to be a really unique dynamic to watch throughout the rest of the year.
Yeah, that's something
Jason,
I do want to expand on too, Christian. Like, it's crazy that we're sitting here talking about it and we're talking about college football, but it's the reality at times. Like when you're in preseason in the NFL, if you're a bubble guy or a guy that you don't think is going to make the roster, you know that those last 2 preseason game and those opportunities is your film and opportunity to really try out for the other 31 other teams. Now with a possibility of, well, not possibility, but with a new regime coming in and, you know, a possible of a full house cleanup, everyone's going to be looking at tape. There's a big possibility this team next year looks absolutely nothing like what it looks like this year. And we already knew that that was going to be the case just off the strength that we had a lot of guys graduating, guys who are going to be moving on to the NFL. Well, now with Coach Franklin gone, transfer portals, guys coming in, a new regime coming in, bringing in their own guys and their own recruits. Like, this is a time now to play and be the best possible version you could be than there's ever been. And that's, like you said, that's just the business. That's the reality, because this new coach may come in and not like some guys and may send some guys on their way. And that's just the unfortunate, you know, life that we live in right now. But that's college football now. So it's just crazy that you spoke like that, Christian, but it's the absolute truth.
And speaking of a new regime, a new starting quarterback for Penn State going into tonight's game, Drew Aller out for the remainder of the season. Ethan Grunkemeyer, we said there is a game to play. This is obviously a major story and will have implications on how the team performs tonight. But we do want to talk about the actual matchup of Penn State and Iowa here from Kinnick Stadium. The team just arrived. Some of the players coming out on the field right now, making their pregame walk down the tunnel and out onto the field. One of the toughest environments in all of college football. As Jason, I know he can speak to that, and he has several times already. So we will talk about the game. Modelo, the official import beer sponsor of Penn State football. Please drink responsibly, 21 plus. We'll talk about Penn State and Iowa when we come back here on the Modelo Penn State football pregame show.
This is the mark of a fighter. A rich, full-flavored lager with a crisp, refreshing taste. A reward for those with a fighting spirit. You've earned this, so hold it up high. Modelo, the mark of a fighter.
We are going for all the marbles next year.
You know the history, and you have felt the roar. But now, you can relive it all.
I think he was looking for a good meal, Italian meal.
Welcome to the Vault on Roar Plus, where every unforgettable Penn State moment lives forever.
If you can get people to believe you're fair, I think that's the whole secret of coaching.
From black and white grit to high-def glory, the Vault is your front row seat to the moments that built this tradition and the ones that built you as a fan. It's not just history, it's Penn State history. And it's all right here at Roar Plus. The roar never stops.
This is the mark of a fighter. A rich, full-flavored lager with a crisp, refreshing taste. A reward for those with a fighting spirit. You've earned this, so hold it up high. Modelo, the mark of a fighter.
Welcome back here on the Penn State Modelo pregame show from Iowa City. Brian Tripp here, and I can tell you cloudy skies, a little bit of wind, maybe some light precipitation in the forecast throughout tonight's game. Fingers crossed that we stay dry here in Iowa City. Christian Hackenberg, Jason Kabinda along as well. We talked about the end of an era for head coach James Franklin, but also for a 3-year starting quarterback in Drew Aller. And really, this is now, as they turn the page, first, Drew, significant contributions, obviously led the team to 2 playoff wins last year and within one drive of going to the national championship. But you can see the impact that he had during his career at Penn State, his numbers from this season as well. No one better to talk about Drew Aller than our own quarterback, Christian Hackenberg.
Yeah, I think when you look at it emotionally, represented the program really, really well. Tip of the cap from a guy who also had to do that, and he's doing it in a completely different era. than I was, in the sense of how fast social media is involved, touch points, all kinds of things that come into effect. So I thought overall he handled it extremely, extremely well. I'm very, very proud of him, and I wish him nothing but a speedy recovery and the best in the future. Now, kind of looking at it, I think similarly to Coach Franklin's narrative, at least in the Penn State fan base, Drew has a very similar one. He's a guy who won everything he should have won. Doesn't really have like a marquee win that pops. Played really well in some of these losses, but doesn't have that marquee win that really pops off the shelf for me. And I think like that's going to be a motivating factor for him moving along in his career. And it's just one of those things where you're always going to have something you wish you had done better. I mean, there's games that I do the same thing, and like nothing's ever going to be perfect. But to kind of put a bow on it, like, could not be more proud of the kid. It was extremely tough position. I empathized with him both on screen and off screen several times, probably more so than he knows. And I'm just really proud of him.
Yeah, I could go into that a little bit too. I think it honestly reminds me a little bit of you, Hack, but even worse, at least for you, when you got injured in your last game, and it actually was your last game. I think it sucks for Drew that, he had more games, still left on the shelf and doesn't get to finish those things out. I really hope that it's a motivating factor for the rest of the team. That's tough because he's a leader of the team. Obviously, he's your quarterback. You'd hope that it's something that the guys are able to rally around. You'd hope that these guys are able to rally around Ethan. But I remember for us, and I know you remember this, Hackenberg, when Torrance, tore his ACL, our starting defensive end. And, the doctors basically said he wasn't going to be able to play again. And I remember for us, Sharif Miller actually ended up wearing Torrance's number 19. He ended up putting on that very next game. I believe it was against Pitt. And I remember we rallied around Torrance and just everybody knowing that, man, you can't take anything, any day, any practice, any game for granted because you just never know when it's going to be your last. Obviously, we hope to see Drew playing on Sunday, so I'm not saying it's the end of his football career, but it is the end of his Penn State football career, and I hope that's something that these guys are able to rally around because they still have more opportunities ahead of them.
Yeah, and let's look back at some of the great plays from that Penn State football career for quarterback Drew Aller.
The pocket, fires on the run. Keandre Lambert-Smith is gone. Welcome to the Drew Aller era. It's a Penn State touchdown. We make ourselves a bowl-eligible team. They've gone 2-1, so they won't get to the 6 wins. As Aller loads it up deep down the field, separation. It's caught. Amari Evans down to the 1.
Wissy wants to throw the slant and come up and make the tackle.
Here comes a blitz. Aller scrambles around, throws complete. They pick up another 4th down.
What a
Julian Fleming.
What a play by Aller there.
Aller going to try to run it himself, and he got there. Touchdown, Penn State. Drew Aller keeps it himself. Did he get there?
How about that one?
Touchdown. Drew Aller asking for it. In trouble. They have a hold of his jersey, and he throws to the end zone.
Wow! What
touchdown!
Play.
Harrison Wallace.
Matteo Uiagalelei had him by the jersey.
Attack. 4-man rush. Aller. He's going to take a shot. Amari Evans. Right down the chimney. Touchdown! On the 35. Fake it to Singleton. Aller takes the shot. Separation. Touchdown.
What our audience couldn't hear as we were watching that backstage was Jason say a lot of NFL throws on there from Drew Aller. He had surgery on that left ankle this week. He's trying to make it out here too. It just shows you the type of person that he is, trying to make it here to Kinnick Stadium in Iowa City today to support his teammates. And speaking of those teammates, Ethan Grunkemeyer now takes over first game as a starting quarterback in a very difficult environment here at Kinnick Stadium. Let's look at the numbers for Grunk so far this season. And this is a guy who has had a small sample size. He got a strong arm. He's got some mobility. There's the numbers in week 1 against Nevada. And now he is thrust into the spotlight here against Iowa tonight. A very difficult place to make his first career start.
Very difficult to say the least. But it's the old adage, man. There's no getting ready. You got to stay ready. And I think he's a kid who, at least from everything that I've heard, has gotten better even throughout the season, which is tough with limited reps coming out of training camp after being named the backup. And it's an opportunity, man. Like, you have to play the game to find out what you're all about. And as a competitor, like, where else would you rather be, man? Like, you know what I mean? Like, if I'm gonna come in and play in a game, like, put me in the biggest stage and let me prove it to my teammates that I can be a guy that they can depend on. And at the end of the day, if I fall flat on my face, like, there's a lot of excuses for that, and you could continue to get up and keep going. Like, it's not the end of the world. So it's just a heck of an opportunity for the kid, and he's obviously earned it. And it's going to be really interesting to see how Coach K handles that. You know, is there going to be times where he potentially takes some pressure off him? Do we see a little bit of that mixture with Jackson Smolik now, right? Drew's out, so everything's kind of wide open. You know, I don't know. But it's going to be a really cool product and an environment for him, and I think he's going to be able to ultimately capitalize on it. And it's at the end of the day, every opportunity is a learning opportunity, and there's going to be good, there's going to be bad, and he can continue to build upon it.
Yeah, I know he has a small sample size of what we've seen so far, but you know what I remember from watching the tape is just that, you know, he's very decisive. I think honestly he has a capability to unlock our offense a little bit because he has even more mobility than Drew Allar. I think he can kind of really truly define him as a dual threat guy, and I think that that's a possibility. Just allow things to flow a little bit more. You know, make it a little bit easier on third downs. Maybe he's going to pick some up with his legs and keep the chains moving, things of that nature. But he's always been decisive. He doesn't hesitate, and I just hope he just goes out there and he lets loose. You know, obviously him and Terry are both, you know, thrusted to the top of the food chain in both positions. So, you know, I know they're bonding just off the strength of that alone. I just hope everybody's able to rally around him, give him the confidence that he needs, pick him up when he needs to be picked up, because at the end of the day, he'll be playing in Kinnick. That's a very tough place to play at. I still remember Hackenberg when they used to tell us not to put our helmets on the back of the benches because the fans are so close. They can literally reach over and grab your helmets and send them up the stadiums. So hopefully they're still giving out those reminders today. But, man, I hope they go out there. I hope Ethan's able to let loose, man, and everybody's be able to rally around him and help him up when he needs it.
Obviously, the key stories for Penn State: new coach, new quarterback, and managing all the dynamics that are going on. So let's talk about Iowa a little bit. And this is your typical Iowa team. They run the ball really well, have a stout run defense, and they're getting really good play over the last couple of weeks from their transfer quarterback, Mark Gronowski, who comes in. He's a big guy, a dual threat guy himself. And as we take a look at Gronowski's season so far this year, he was dealing with an injury a couple of weeks ago. Is he totally 100%? Not sure, but over his last 4 games, 70% completion percentage, 616 yards and a couple of touchdowns. He has 8 rush touchdowns this year as well, not on your screen there. And he now, as he gets going, is another compliment to what is a really good running game for Iowa with 3 backs, Moulton, Williams, and McNeil. And that's kind of the story of the Iowa offense right now.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing that you say. You know, he's got 8 rushing touchdowns. You know, his legs are a legitimate threat. And I think that's something that not a lot of people are looking at and are kind of realizing about this kid is, you know, he can go, he can make plays. He won't be hesitant about it. When it's time to tuck it, he's going to tuck it, and he's going to go and lower the shoulder, man. Big guy. So that's a guy that we're going to have to make it hard on him, make it tough. I think if we can shrink his confidence early in this game, force some mistakes, man. Let this defense go out there and make some big plays so that we can give that juice over to the offense and let them go score, man. I think it's going to start on defense for us.
Iowa 2 losses this year, really close against Iowa State on the road in the rivalry game, and a 5-point loss to Indiana. This is an Iowa team that is playing well right now and has some confidence after shutting out Wisconsin 37-0 last time out. They're only allowing 13 points per game against, and I know you guys, Christian, why don't you start it here, taking us through some of the highlights as we take a further look at Iowa.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at them defensively, I alluded to it earlier. They're a very physical team at the lines of scrimmage, and what better challenge for this Penn State team? You talk about Coach Smith and some of the points that he brought up in his opening press conferences is you're no longer going to question the physicality, toughness, and care factor of this football team moving forward as long as he's overlooking it. He talked about how he's examining depth charts day in and day out, right? That's a great thing. It's a clean slate for all of these players. So the phrase I've used all week is there's opportunity in chaos. And this Iowa football team is going to challenge us in all of the right ways to ultimately find out if this team has enough gumption to finish the season the right way with pride for each other, for themselves, for the school, whatever it may be.
Yeah, I personally think that it was huge that Coach Terry Smith went and said that in his interview. And he said, look, we're going to look at the depth charts because, Christian, we know, whether it's the NFL, whether it's college, if you're on a losing streak or things aren't going well, that's the first thing you got to look at is who do you have on the field? Are they being put in positions to go out there and make plays? And when you hear your head coach go out there in front of the media and say, hey, we're going to be looking at our depth chart, man, that should make everybody make sure that they're on their stuff, day in and day out, doing what they need to do to go and put out the best version of themselves out there on Saturday and tonight. So I think that was big time. I really do. I think competition is a big thing. It's a good thing. Iron sharpens iron. And, these young guys, when they hear that kind of stuff, man, I think their ears should be perking up. Your ears should be perking up. That's your opportunity, or more opportunities are going to come to some younger guys, or maybe some guys that we haven't seen just yet. So I'm actually very interested to see how that plays out in today's game, and if we see any wrinkles offensively and defensively in terms of the depth chart.
I mentioned where Iowa's at this year. We'll take a look at their schedule to this point. They had the two close losses to Iowa State and to Indiana. It's the fewest penalties in the country, Iowa, right? You're going to have to be sharp in all three phases here against the Hawkeyes in a tough environment on the road. There are good special teams. As usual, they take care of the hitting yardage on the field and very stout defensively. And that's how they've gotten to this point, two tight losses for the Hawkeyes. So, what are the keys coming into tonight's game against Iowa? Christian, your keys for Penn State to come in here and have some success, as there is at the end of the week here, there is a football game to play.
Yeah, man. I think it's about managing your emotions. Obviously, it's been a big talking point of this entire show. Can you harness those things and channel them in the right way? Physical at the line of scrimmage, you have to win the battle, right? On paper, this Penn State team has looked the part on the tape. It hasn't necessarily translated and or correlated. So you have to win the line of scrimmage. And then secondarily, I think for this offense, they need to get what do you got to lose? Like, let's start cutting this thing loose, opening it up a little bit more. And giving your guys some opportunities to make plays in space, because I think that's where we still have an advantage is we can out-athlete these guys if we can be tough enough at the lines of scrimmage and play matchup ball on the outsides. I think our offense has a great chance to take advantage of some of those matchups. So for me, it's those three things.
Yeah, I agree 1,000% with what Christian said there. I think number one, it starts with physicality. I mean, what I saw in UCLA was unacceptable from a physicality standpoint. I mean, I was seeing D tackles getting absolutely ragdolled. They're running inside zone for 10, 11 a pop. I mean, this Iowa team, they are going to establish this running game. And if they can't stop this running game, it is going to be a long game or one of those controlled time of possessions games. And that's just not what we want to do right now. I think number two, that not a lot of people are talking about, but man, Iowa's known for their special teams. There's going to be a couple wrinkles in this game, in the return game, in the punt rush game. That is a wrinkle for Iowa because they dial something up each and every game, because that's one of those teams that's always looking for an advantage in the special teams game. So we're going to have to be really on our P's and Q's when it comes to the special teams, doing what we're supposed to do and limiting their returner, because each and every year it just seems like they keep putting out really good returners, man. They've been great. I mean, truly, that's a cultural thing for Iowa. So limiting them on special teams as well. We can't afford any big plays that will, the crowd gets in the game. Then it's a momentum thing. We just can't allow that today. So physicality is number one. Without it, nothing's going to get done. And then number two, man, we gotta win. We got to come out on the other side feeling like we won in the special teams area.
You guys hit on everything that I had written down. I'll say one more thing. Iowa has won 6 straight night games here at Kinnick, and you need to manage that crowd. You need to get something positive going for this football team. It is starting fast here. Manage the crowd and manage the weather, although it looks like we're going to stay dry. Temperatures will drop down into the 60s. There's a little wind here blowing. Right now, it's blowing towards the right end zone as I'm looking at it. Well, we'll have a bye week next week, and then we'll have the pregame show again before Penn State and Ohio State in a couple of weeks before we're back at Beaver Stadium again in November. Fellas, thanks so much for joining us today from home. I'm here in Iowa, and great work as always. Really, really appreciate it.
Appreciate you, Trip. Enjoy.
Should be a good one. Penn State and Iowa. Modelo presenting our pregame show here today, the official import beer partner of Penn State football. 21 plus. Please drink responsibly. For Jason Kabinda and Christian Hackenberg and our entire crew, Brian Tripp saying so long from Iowa City. Penn State and Iowa coming up on Peacock tonight at 7 o'clock. Also on the Penn State Sports Network. We'll talk to you not next week, in 2 weeks here on the Penn State football pregame show.
This is the mark of a fighter. A rich, full-flavored lager with a crisp, refreshing taste. A reward for those with a fighting spirit. You've earned this, so hold it up high. Modelo, the mark of a fighter.
We are going for all the marbles next year.
You know the history, and you have felt the roar. But now, you can relive it all.
I think he was looking for a good meal, Italian meal.
Welcome to the Vault on Roar Plus, where every unforgettable Penn State moment lives forever.
If you can get people to believe you're fair, I think that's the whole secret of coaching.
From black and white grit to high def glory, the Vault is your front row seat to the moments that built this tradition and the ones that built you as a fan. It's not just history, it's Penn State history. And it's all right here at Roar Plus. The roar never stops.
This is the mark of a fighter. A rich, full-flavored lager with a crisp, refreshing taste. A reward for those with a fighting spirit. You've earned this, so hold it up high. Modelo, the mark of a fighter.